So there are many dangers in this whole thing. Because one, if you do not realize that evil is ultimately part of yourself and ultimately part of the good, then you will project it outside, and then you end up demonizing others and wanting to destroy the evil you perceive in the other, or be it even in terms of some cosmic battle between God and the devil, or Satan, or these kinds of concepts. So that's one of the major dangers. But there are other dangers, because on the other hand, when you start to realize that good and evil belong ultimately to one singularity, one wholeness, one unit, and you can also become a prey of a kind of a worship of the shadow, which is the other extreme. So you would have equally people that feel that they're always the good ones. They would be like over-identifying with the good. And then you also have people that can fall prey to worshiping the shadow, or becoming possessed by the shadow, and not realizing that the union of these two opposites results in a new principle, a third principle, which would be neither of the two, but a balance or a wholeness. That's why when we talk about accepting the shadow, we're not saying accepting the shadow as the shadow, but we're saying it mindful that by integrating the shadow and by its touching the good, something new is born, and that new element is what we then seek, which is the paradox, or which is perfect balance. And then you don't get something that is either too good or too evil. And then you find this idea, for instance, in the church, the problem of pedophilia in the church, where on the one hand you have this good priest, and then on the other hand you have the same priest shape-shifting into a pedophile and violating little children. So then you have that idea that you have on the one hand something that is too good to be true, on the other hand something that is very evil. And in presenting these ideas, we have to be very careful to not say evil doesn't exist. Evil does exist. The further that opposite goes from the good, the more evil it becomes, which is what we're witnessing now on the planet. We're witnessing a complete polarization between the good and the evil. And the great danger is, whilst in accepting and understanding that the opposites had to come apart, the big challenge now is to take another step in our God concept, or our concept of deity or wholeness, and realizing that the two are connected. So the one had to come apart, and it has to reconnect. The coming apart is also part of love, because without the coming apart there would be no coming back together. But ultimately now the opposites have to come back together. So and this is a very, very important thing, because as you said in the beginning, many, for instance, videos on the YouTube are unconsciously still fueling this division between good and evil, and demonizing certain groups, and then feeling that we belong to the good guys. And while this has been a very important stage in the development of consciousness, which we could say would be the Pisces era, the new era is taking another step away from the idea that these two principles are completely separate. And and the challenge is to do this in a way that the institutions that have been erected around the Piscean division between good and evil do not feel that they are being violated. You see, the church played a very important role. Yet, if I'm not mistaken, in the Bible is also written that at the end of times a new gospel would be opened, which is referred to as an eternal gospel. With that we mean that a yet higher truth or axiom would become conscious, not violating the fact that without the separation there would be no individual, there would be no ego, there would be no consciousness. So the two are important. Without the one there would be no next step. And that's where Jung and Father White, there was almost, we could say, an integration between the church and Jung, in which we could have made a giant step forward towards where we would realize that if everybody doesn't accept the evil in themselves that they project outside, we would ultimately lead to a destruction of everything.
So why this didn't happen between them?
Because the church is founded on the separation of good and evil. That's their most fundamental axiom. You see? And Jung did understand that ultimately evil is part of the whole, the shadow. That the shadow had to be, as it were, thrown out of heaven initially, in order for this journey of awareness, self-awareness to occur. But eventually the shadow would have to be recognized as part of the whole. You see, love must conquer, meaning union. And ultimately also the shadow has to be accepted. And the truth of it is, the reality of it is that whatever is rejected becomes ugly, dangerous, toxic. But as we start to accept that rejected content, it changes. And that's why, as we go from the Old Testament to the New Testament, we find a transformation in the God concept.